Good day to you, ladies, and today we are going to be having a look at B9 respiration, lesson 3. What is anaerobic respiration? Okay, so we've already had a look at aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is respiration with oxygen, the reaction that takes place with glucose, and it releases carbon dioxide and water, and as it's an exothermic reaction, that energy from the reaction is then given out into the environment, which is then used, for example, in humans for muscle movement, using the energy transferred by aerobic respiration. Okay, and we can have our muscles contracting and relaxing, and therefore movement occurs. With anaerobic respiration, it's not as efficient as aerobic respiration because it uses little or no oxygen, so the glucose molecules are not fully broken down, not completely. And in animal cells, the end product of anaerobic respiration is lactic acid. Okay, so we have more lactic acid produced and less energy produced, even though there is energy there. So giving you an example of anaerobic respiration in animals, if we were to think about or look at a person who is exercising hard or vigorously, their muscles may become short of oxygen. Okay, we know, since we have done response to exercise lesson, that when your body exercises, you require more oxygen in your lungs to be able to be used in respiration. Okay, that process that gives you energy to be able to make the movement of the muscles to be able to contract and have body parts moving. So for example, if someone's running a race and it's a short race, they're not going to be they're going to run extremely fast. They're going to have to run very fast. So what happens is that their breathing is not allowing them to take in enough oxygen to be able to be converted to carbon dioxide and water during the respiration process. And so what ends up happening is there is a shortage of oxygen. And although you can increase your heart and your breathing rate, sometimes the blood cannot supply the oxygen to the muscles fast enough. And when that happens, when that occurs, the lactic acid is produced. And the lactic acid needs to be broken down. We don't like it in our body, so we need to break it down. So the two ways that can either happen is either waiting for the oxygen debt, which I'll talk about in a minute, to be cleared, so taking in more oxygen until there's enough there to break down the lactic acid back into carbon dioxide and water, or it then gets turned back into glucose and then stored as glycogen. Okay, so if we have a look at someone who's a runner on a treadmill, or for example someone who is very active or athletic, they generally have a tendency to have a higher blood rate, higher pulse rate. They have a tendency to have a better lung capacity because of the activities or the vigorous activities they do. They over time can train their bodies to increase the lung surface area, which helps for gas exchange, so they can take in more oxygen and they can release more carbon dioxide, but they can do that a lot quicker because they have a larger surface area, as compared to a person who is not very active. So in instances like running, they will still get muscle fatigue. They will still get to a point where their muscles don't have enough energy to keep the muscle fibers contracting, and then what happens is that their bodies end up with an oxygen debt. An oxygen debt basically means that lactic acid has built up instead of carbon dioxide and water. So in order for that lactic acid to be broken down, they need to remove the debt of oxygen that's there. They need to take in more oxygen to remove that debt. So they need to, so a lot of times when you see runners at the end of the race, the reason why they're panting the way they are is because their muscle fibers need that oxygen coming into their bodies so that that lactic acid can be broken down. And that's why the breathing, labored breathing, increased breathing occurs. So if muscles work hard for a long time, they become fatigued and they don't contract efficiently. If they don't get enough oxygen, they will start respiring anaerobically. So being fit means that you have a good supply of blood going through your body. You'll obviously have, when you're exercising, try and make sure that you've got enough glucose in your body. So it's not ideal to exercise on an empty stomach, obviously, because you're not using your muscles as well as you could if you had some food inside of you and there was glucose in your bloodstream. And obviously they require more oxygen, so they will be able to take in long, deeper breaths, and because of that, the surface area of their lungs increases, allowing for this to happen. Someone like myself who's not very fit, my blood supply is going to be a lot poorer. We're not so worried about less glucose, but less oxygen will then be traveling around in my bloodstream, going to the muscles, and that's going to reduce the amount of respiration that takes place, okay, which releases less energy for the muscles, and this increases fatigue. You get more tired. So animals, humans and animals, are not the only living organisms that can respire anaerobically. We have some plants and microorganisms that can also respire without oxygen. Okay. However, when plant cells respire anaerobically, they do not form lactic acid. Instead, they form ethanol and carbon dioxide. So that's the difference between humans or animals respiring anaerobically and plant or microorganisms respiring anaerobically. There are different products made. Okay, so you're going to try and remember that. So it is quite beneficial. We can have plants that grow in marshes or in areas where the oxygen concentration levels are quite low. They'll still be able to respire, they'll still be able to carry out their life processes that they need in order to survive. Another example is yeast. Glucose in yeast cells are converted to carbon dioxide and ethanol, which is simply referred to as alcohol. So there are instances where these uses are beneficial to the economy. So to summarize, I'll finish off with some key points. Point 1. If muscles work hard for a long time, they become fatigued and don't contract efficiently. If they don't get enough oxygen, they will respire anaerobically. Point 2. Anaerobic respiration is respiration without oxygen. When this takes place in animal cells, glucose is incompletely broken down to form lactic acid. Point 3. The anaerobic breakdown of glucose transfers less energy than aerobic respiration. After exercise, this is point number 4. After exercise, oxygen is still needed to break down the lactic acid that has built up. The amount of oxygen needed is known as the oxygen debt. And finally, anaerobic respiration in plant cells and some microorganisms, such as yeast, result in the production of ethanol and carbon dioxide and can be useful in many processes. I hope you enjoyed your lesson. Please move on to your booklet and complete the questions on the topic. Thank you very much.